You know that moment when the whole world is screaming about the game and you're just standing there like, wait, who's winning? And why does everybody look emotionally uninsured? What if I told you that not obsessing over sports isn't boring? It's actually a very specific psychological pattern. And once you see it, you'll never unsee it. Today, we're talking about the psychology of people who don't obsess over sport. The people who can sit through a championship like it's an airplane safety video. And why that's not a personality flaw, it's a clue about identity, reward, belonging, and attention. First, let's admit something. Sports obsession isn't about sports. Let's start with the obvious but not obvious truth. For a lot of fans, sports are not just entertainment, they're identity. Like, if you've ever seen a grown adult say, "We won," when they did not sprint even 1 centimeter on that field, that's not a delusion, that's psychology. There's a concept called social identity theory, Henry Tajfel and John Turner. The basic idea is that humans naturally sort themselves into groups, us and them, because it gives us a sense of belonging and meaning. And sports make that incredibly easy. Clear teams, clear enemies, clear rules, clear victory conditions, and a schedule that tells you exactly when to feel something. It's basically emotional furniture. So when someone says, "I can't believe you don't watch football," what they often mean is, "I can't believe you're not joining the group ritual." And if you're the person who doesn't obsess, you're not broken. You just don't get the same identity glue from it. The Berg effect. Why fans feel like winners even when they didn't play. Okay, here's a fun one. In psychology, there's a phenomenon called basking in reflected glory, or BIRGing, studied by Robert Cialdini and colleagues, 1976. It's when we boost our self-esteem by associating with someone else's success. That's why after a win, people say, "We dominated," "We're unstoppable," "We're going all the way." And after a loss, it turns into, "They played terribly," "That coach is an idiot," "The refs were paid." That flip is sometimes called corfing, cutting off reflected failure. Now, if you don't obsess over sport, there's a good chance your brain doesn't get as much self-esteem payoff from borrowed victory. You might be more like, "Cool win, but how does that change my rent?" And honestly, that's a valid nervous system response. The reward system. Some brains just don't get the same juice from it. Sports are basically built to hijack attention in the most human way possible. Uncertainty, rivalry, suspense, near misses, high stakes, social celebration. It's basically emotional furniture. So when someone says, "I can't believe you don't watch football," what they often mean is, "I can't believe you're not joining the group ritual." And if you're the person who doesn't obsess, you're not broken. You just don't get the same identity glue from it. Some people don't use sports to regulate emotion because they already have other regulators. Here's a slightly deeper layer. A lot of people use sports as emotional regulation, not in a dramatic way, more like stress relief, mood lift, social connection, distraction from life, controlled emotional release. Yelling at a TV is safer than yelling at your boss. Sports give people permission to feel joy, anger, hope, heartbreak with other humans. Now, people who don't obsess over sport often already regulate emotion through other channels. Books, the gym, meditation, humor, music, deep friendships, creative projects, learning, fitness without fandom, niche hobbies that sound fake until you meet the community. Shout out to people who keep bees or build keyboards. Same brain, different reward menu. And this matters because we're constantly told one story. If you don't love sports, you're missing out. But psychologically, what's really happening is you're not getting rewarded by the same stimulus. That's not a moral failing. That's wiring plus experience. Personality plays a role, especially openness and introversion. Let's talk about personality without turning this into a lab report. Research around the Big Five personality traits often finds small but real patterns in sports fandom. For example, some studies suggest stronger sports fandom can relate to traits like extroversion, enjoying high stimulation and social energy. Not always, but often enough to notice. So if you're more introverted, sports culture can feel like loud, performative, and mandatory fun. and strangely exhausting. Also, openness to experience matters. If you're high in openness, you might be less drawn to repetitive seasonal rituals and more drawn to newness, new ideas, new art, new experiences. Not better, not worse, just different fuel. The biggest factor people ignore is childhood exposure and emotional imprinting. Most sports obsession isn't born in adulthood, it's imprinted. If you grew up with a parent who watched every game, family weekends built around sports, bonding moments tied to teams, a community where being a fan was social currency, then sports are emotionally coded as love, belonging, and tradition. But if your childhood bonding was built around movies, music, reading, church, debate, building things, quiet time, travel, or maybe you just didn't have stable rituals, then sports may feel emotionally neutral. And human beings don't obsess over what feels neutral. We obsess over what feels like home. My experience is what I agree to attend to. There's a quote often attributed to psychologist William James, "My experience is what I agree to attend to." That's the whole story in one sentence. People who don't obsess over sport aren't missing a sports gene. They're allocating attention elsewhere towards what their brain considers meaningful, useful, or emotionally rewarding. And attention is not just focus. Attention is life direction. So if you've ever felt weird for not caring, here's the reframe. Maybe you're not indifferent. Maybe you're simply selective. Now, here's where it gets interesting and a little uncomfortable. Because the real reason people get annoyed when you don't like sports isn't about the sport. It's about what your non-participation signals. To a hardcore fan, someone not caring can feel like rejection of the group, rejection of tradition, rejection of normal culture, or even rejection of them. Which is why a simple "I'm not really into sports" sometimes gets treated like you said, "I don't believe in happiness." Ever notice that? And if you're the non-obsessor, you might start masking. You nod along, you fake pain when someone mentions an injury, and that's a weird little social dance we do to keep belonging. So here's a question I want you to sit with. What do you pretend to like just to be socially safe? Because whether it's sports, music, trends, or partying, people-pleasing has a cost. The healthiest non-sports psychology? Autonomy. Let's bring in self-determination theory, Edward D.C. and Richard Ryan, which says humans are motivated by 3 core needs: autonomy, choice, competence, getting better, and relatedness. People who don't obsess over sport often prioritize autonomy more strongly in their leisure. They don't want to love something because everyone else does. They want to love what genuinely fits. And honestly, that's a mature emotional response. Not as flashy as screaming at a TV, but mature. So if you're someone who doesn't obsess over sport, here's the real takeaway. You're not missing out on life. You're revealing something about how your brain builds identity, regulates emotion, and chooses meaning. And if you do love sports, also beautiful. That's your tribe, your ritual, your story. The point isn't to rank passions. The point is to notice. What captures your attention captures your life. So here's my question for you. If you don't obsess over sport, what do you obsess over, and what does it give you emotionally? Drop it in the comments. I read them, and I love seeing the hidden worlds people live in. If this video gives you a new way to understand yourself or your friends, hit like, subscribe, and share it with the person who says we won like they personally paid the team's salary. I'll see you in the next one.